Hello you guys, it is time for another book review. What did I read in September? Let's get into it. Actually, before we get into it, I'd appreciate it. No negative comments on how incredibly terrible my hair is looking. I'm in the process of growing it long, and I just hit that really awkward stage where no matter what I do with it, it is unflattering and terrible looking. So I'd appreciate it if nobody says anything. Alright, so we're gonna go into the book review for September. I'm actually having to say that I'm going towards the end of my time here in Saudi Arabia. I told my boss, depending on certain extenuating circumstances, I will either be quitting by the end of this year or by spring of next year. And my next destination is South America. I think I maybe already mentioned that. So basically, I ordered a whole bunch of books when this whole lockdown thing started, and I've kind of been reading them as I'm the most interested in them. I don't want to order any more books because I'm on my way of leaving, and now I'm kind of stuck with a lot of books that I'm not super interested in reading anymore. So I think my reading reviews and especially my ratings are going to start going down, more and more in the next couple of months. All right. Oh, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books in the month of September. As you guys know, I always go in the order of how I read them, not in the order of how I liked them. The one difference this time is the very last book I'm going to review, I'm going to do a little bit more of an in-depth review about, or rather I'm going to go on a tangent about it. It's not even necessarily going to be about the book itself. And I wanted to do that last, so for those people who are not interested, they can just click out of the video at that time. Alright, let's finally get started. First book I read is called, Ravensong by Maracle. This was a recommended read by Abe Reads Books, who is one of my favorite booktubers. Although I have to say, the books that I've read from her reviews so far, I have not been a fan of, in just like this one. I also told you guys that I like reading books that have other perspectives. I actually really enjoy reading books about different cultures and different situations, different people, different lifestyles, all this kind of stuff. So this is a book that is about First Nations people. Specifically, it is about a young girl. She is First Nations. It is the late 1940s, early 1950s. When actually, trigger warning. It's about the Spanish flu pandemic and it hitting Canada. I forget if she's on the west coast or east coast now. She's in Vancouver, so she's on the west coast of Canada, and how the Native American tribe dealt with the issues of being a minority and how the Canadian people treated First Nations people for a big portion of the history, plus how they dealt with the pandemic, considering that they, in general, didn't have access to the good hospitals, the good medication and such. Didn't like the writing. I think for me the writing was way too flowery, and I don't like flowery writing. Every chapter began with what I think was supposed to kind of give you this feeling of First Nations, Native American, where there was like raven and birch tree were talking about things, and to me it was just really flowery and cheesy. I didn't find that it added to the feeling of the novel. Also, in light of a lot of the things that have happened in the last like 2 or 3 years. I think if I had read this like 5, 6 years ago, I would have enjoyed it more. But there is a lot of things in this novel. There is a lot of things in this novel where it's really, again, like white man bad, native people good, and I'm just really kind of, I want to read about other cultures, and I want to experience other cultures, but I don't like how everything has to be. I don't like when you have to pull down other people to bring yourself up. And when I read a novel like this, and it's all about like the only way she could think to elate the native population is by tearing down white people culture and how evil white people are and how white people are so weird and stupid and everything that native people do is amazing. I'm just not into that anymore. Like I'm getting tired of this, how you can be blatantly racist against white people and you can say anything against white culture and it's okay. But if this book was written the other way around from a white person perspective and they were saying how First Nations culture is stupid and weird and tacky, then that would not even be allowed to be published these days anymore. So I kind of had no problem with that. And I actually put a little tab here because I got really upset. Because one of the things that Lee Maracle wrote all the time was how she was saying how strange she thought the interactions were between white men and white women, and it was so patriarchal, and white men were so obviously constantly putting down white women, and how white women didn't have anything to say in the household, and how white women were secondary characters in a white culture, and how strange she thought that was, kind of giving the impression how men and women are so much more equal in the native culture. But then on this page, her uncle comes to her house, and the only people who are home is her and her mother. And she is saying how she is not allowed to let her uncle into her house because women by themselves can't let a single man into their house because it would be inappropriate, and how that the neighbors would talk, and how and like how that's just not the correct behavior of a woman. They had to wait for a male member of the house to come to allow them to let their uncle come into the house. And I'm like, this is complete hypocrisy. It is absolute hypocrisy. You can't make a statement about how women are secondary in white culture and try to make that the thesis of your book, and then basically give a bunch of examples of how women were basically secondary people in your own native culture. So that really turned me off. For me, this is a 2-star. I didn't enjoy the writing. I didn't like the hypocrisy, and I'm just tired of blatant, I don't know what the best word to say. Like, I'm tired of blatant racism towards white people to elate other cultures. I think you can say how beautiful Black culture is and Asian culture is and Native American culture is and Hispanic culture is. I think you can do that without having to say, well, but white people are shit. I'm just tired of that. Like, it just turns me off. The next book I read is Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. Palahniuk? Can't say his name. And this is a signed or an autographed copy. Last year I read Pygmy by him, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than this book. I also enjoyed this one. I really like his writing style. I think he's a very gifted author. Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much everybody now knows what the plot is of this book. It's basically a man, and he is feeling disillusioned about society and how he comes to grips with it. I don't really want to give any spoils for those few people who haven't seen the movie or read the book, and how he goes about kind of figuring out where he feels he belongs in the world, and excellent writing. The plot I thought was okay. I thought it got a little bit cheesy because I don't know, I can't say so much about it because the twist of the story, I felt the twist was really, it was delayed, but it was delayed in a way that to me didn't make sense because I feel like anybody in that situation would have already figured that twist out. So I thought that was kind of a little bit like, really? Somebody hasn't figured that out yet? I don't know. But I do think he's an excellent writer. I think it's a very short read. You can read it over a weekend for sure. It's definitely a story that you haven't read 100 times. So I'll give that a 4 out of 5 star. Then I read The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. This was by far the best read for me in the month. You guys know that Pride and Prejudice is by far one of my all-time favorite books of all time. Definitely one of the best written English classics in my opinion. I have read a plethora of retellings and other perspectives of this story. In this story, you follow the middle sister, Mary, who in the original book is basically just kind of put as the difficult one who's antisocial and can't really fit into any kind of she can't fit in comfortably in social settings, and she just kind of goes off and does her reading and does her piano, and that's really all you get from her. So here we have a story that basically shows how Pride and Prejudice would have happened from her perspective. And the book is in 3 parts, if I remember correctly. The first part basically follows the plot of Pride and Prejudice, and it just shows it from her perspective. Probably my favorite part, personally, even though the rest also was really great. And then the second and third part then show what would have happened after Pride and Prejudice and what potentially her life would have looked like then. I really enjoyed the fleshing out of this character. I think that she did an amazing job. The writing is beautiful, beautiful writing. Really enjoyed that. I think that the plot made sense. I think that she really showed Mary to be a lot more of a sympathetic or misunderstood character, which I thought was really enjoyable as well. And just the flow of it, I also really enjoyed. The one critique I would have is that to make Mary seem more sympathetic, Janice Hadlow kind of made all the other characters a little bit negative. Which again kind of goes back to this book where it's like, I don't like it when you have to build up one person by pulling down other people. Like, I don't think that's necessary. And that's kind of a little bit what she did. Like, she really kind of laid into Charlotte and Elizabeth and kind of made them seem like they're these unloving sisters who didn't care about Mary and didn't want anything to do with her and weren't willing to, and I just didn't like that because that's not how in my little lover of Pride and Prejudice, the way I view Elizabeth and Charlotte. So it kind of irked me that she wrote them as these kind of people. I think she could have made Charlotte and Elizabeth loving sisters and still added to her storyline and stuff. But definitely recommend this book. Really enjoyable. If you're a Pride and Prejudice fan, pick it up, give it a read. 4.5 stars. Then, for my theme nonfiction books for this year, I read Etymologicon. I don't know. This is a 2-star for me, you guys. Again, this is probably more my own fault. I should have read more about what this book was about. I thought this would be more of a history of how language developed, especially the English language, then maybe some examples of some common roots and how that plays into the building of a language. That I think that's just kind of more what I was looking for. But what it is it's basically certain words that the author, or idioms that the author has decided to kind of break down and give a little bit of a history to. And he does it in a very humorous, flippant way, which, if that is something you would enjoy, then I think this book would be more akin to you. I don't know, if I'm going to pick up nonfiction, then I guess in my head I want it to be a little bit more straightforward, more literary, more scientific based. I don't want it to be flippant and funny. Actually, I'm looking at this book right over here for that. That was also kind of my critique when I read this book, 100 Nasty Women of History, where, she was going through certain women that she thought were important and should be included into history books, but she also wrote it in a very silly fashion. Like the writing was very Valley Girl sounding. Oh my God, you should totally know about this woman. She was like the coolest person ever, and she did all these amazing things. Like, whoa, she's so awesome. And I guess if you like that kind of writing, then you would enjoy that, but that's not what I want from non-fiction books. So I just didn't like the writing. I didn't really like how it was set up. And, I don't know, 2-star. Then I read this book, which is universally loved on BookTube. Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I can appreciate the fact that it's not a very cliche gay love story, meaning it's not like all just about sex and everybody was sexy and they go on a first date and right away they're doing it, and it's not very explicit. It's actually definitely more of a slow burn romance. I don't know. I don't want to give away too much of the plot or the little twist at the end, because it seems like the author Benjamin Alire Saenz, is that how you say that? I don't know. Sorry. Basically, this is a plot about two boys who meet over a summer. They're both kind of awkward and don't have a lot of friends, so they kind of become best friends, and over this summer they have all these adventures, and I don't know how much I can say that there's a love story there. It's okay. It's just, for me, it's a 3-star. It's okay. The writing is decent. I mean, but everybody's like, this is the greatest love story ever. And I don't know. I just kind of got a little bit bored with the... Okay, spoiler. Click 2 minutes ahead if you don't want to hear the spoiler, because I don't know how to say this without the spoiler. I got a little bit tired of how... I forget which one it was. I think Aristotle was kind of going about maybe I'm just asexual, and I just see Dante as a friend. He's just a friend. And then literally in the last chapter, or maybe the last 2 chapters, the parents were like, Aristotle, we know that you love Dante. It's okay. And then he's like, you're right, I love him. And I'm like, what? I was... At that point, we were so far into the novel, I feel like it would have been, for me, okay if it would have just been they would have just been friends. And Dante was gay, and Aristotle would have been asexual or straight or whatever. The ending, all of a sudden, they just dropped this, and now, of course, they're in love with each other. I don't know. To me, that was just a little... I don't know. Okay, then I read Savage Eden by K.M. Ashman. And this is a book taking place in Neanderthal, Ice Age times. This is self-published, and I have to say, for a self-published novel, I was very pleasantly surprised. Decent plot, decent writing, not amazing, but decent. Basically, the first man, I think, Homo chronomum. Okay, I'm totally saying that wrong. I don't know what the first man was called. Whatever would have been the name of the first man. Then the first man and the Neanderthal are currently still living together. The Neanderthal are about to die out, and humans are about to take over as the, height of evolution. And they meet up with each other, and there's some things that happen. I don't want to give away too much of the plot. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting read. The only thing that I didn't really care for is the main female character, who I think... I already told you guys, if I was going to be anything, if I had to support one cause, it would be feminism. And I just feel like the main female character was just very... On the one hand, he was trying to write her as like a strong, independent woman. But then all she did through the whole entire novel is complain and slow everybody down. And she was like, I can't do this. I'm just a woman, and I can't go there because I'm just a woman. And like, oh my God, this is too hard for me because I'm a woman. And, men constantly had to save her. And I'm like... And I'm not saying there can't be women who are like that, but it's like, but then you just shouldn't have written her as a strong female lead. Then just have written her personality from the very beginning as somebody who's very dependent. Because that to me was just kind of like in 1 minute. Oh, and of course she was dropped dead gorgeous. That was the other thing. I mean, like, there was like 4 or 5 scenes where she would like disrobe in front of everybody, which I was like, she's like, and she disrobed in front of everybody, and everybody was looking at her immaculate body. And I'm like, oh, Lord, give me a break. So that was a little like... But yeah, for self-published, not bad. 3-star. Okay, and the book that I actually read before this one, but this one I want to talk about a little bit, is Pachinko by Min Yin? Maybe Min Yin Lee. This is 3.5, 4-star, if that's enough for you guys. Basic story of this is a generational book, kind of akin to 100 Years of Solitude, like a saga of a family over several generations. And this is definitely a melancholy read, a sad read, because it really doesn't seem that these people, for the most part, can catch a break. It's always kind of like things are getting worse and getting worse and getting worse, and you're just kind of like, man, let these people catch a break already. Like these poor people. I enjoyed the writing. The writing is very strong. I enjoyed the plot overall. I think I wasn't as surprised by this book as a lot of people, which is kind of where I want to go towards the end of this, why I wanted to talk about this last. I wasn't as surprised by the content of this book, and I'm generally not somebody who likes these multi-generational books. It's just not something that I'm that into, because in most multi-generational books, including this one, what happens is you have certain generations that you just get a lot of information on and you really get attached to the characters. And then you have others where it's kind of like, because the book is starting to get too long, the author has to kind of rush through it. And then you have other characters where you're just kind of like, okay, who is this? Who is this character really? Do I care about this character? Not really. And if they die or if they get sick or whatever, who cares? Because I didn't have the time to get invested in them. So I think for people who haven't read a lot of generational books and who haven't really known about the plot and the issues in this book, I think that would have made it a 5-star to them. Like I said, both these things are things I was already aware of and I don't really think are that new to me. So that's kind of what brought it down to like a 3.5, 4-star for myself. Okay, so for those of you guys who are not interested in my tangent, because I'm about to go into a tangent about something kind of about this book, but also kind of not related to this book, you can click off now. And for those of you guys who are interested, you can stick around. So, going a little bit more into depth of this plot, what is this book about? Basically, this book is about what's the word? Great way to start a tangent without even knowing the word that you're looking for. Like when there's kind of like now what's happening in Syria, where there's all the Syrians are kind of leaving Syria and they're going to all these different countries. There's a word with like dysphoria? No, not dysphoria, dispersal. Sorry, I can't think of what the word is right now. So this starts during the time of when Japan annexes Korea, and the Korean people are starting to some of them move to Japan, some of them stay in Korea, some of them start going into China. And what this dispersal of the Korean people, what that causes, also then we go into World War II, and the Korean people are definitely, I want to say, second-hand citizen under Japanese rule, but I don't think it would be a far push to say that they're basically slave labor. And they're mistreated, they're jailed, they're beaten, the women are often sold off into prostitution, and these are all true things. This is true, actual incidences in history. And what I think is so interesting, and this is the reason I wanted to kind of go on a tangent here, is because a lot of people who read this book and reviewed it on BookTube, they kind of go like, I never knew this about the history of Japan and Korea and how horrible the Korean people have been treated by the Japanese over generations and generations. And until this day, the Japanese government has never apologized to the Korean people for the mass murder, almost basically a genocide, for the rape, for the kidnappings, for the starvation, for any of the things that happened between them annexing Korea all the way through World War II. There was never an official apology, and the stance that Japan generally always took to this topic was, that's what happens in a time of war. Get over it. I don't really want to talk about the right or wrongness of that, but what I want to talk about more is how I think this shows, how to say this, I think this really shows how media, how public perception, how the way you act and think about certain situations impacts how later generations think and feel. If you ask the average person, except maybe the Chinese and the Koreans, take those two people apart, separate, ask pretty much anywhere else in the world, what do you think of the Japanese? They will say they're smart, they're cool, they have all this interesting technology, the anime, the kawaii culture, like positive. Japan and the Japanese people in general have such a positive view in the rest of the world. The rest of the world has such a positive view of them. Meanwhile, for those of you guys who've been on my channel for a while, I have lived in Japan. And I can tell you right now, Japan is still incredibly racist. Way more racist than probably any other Western nation in the world. I mean, when I was a teacher there, I had several students tell me or ask me, oh, how long are you planning to be in Japan? And I'm like, oh, my contract is 1 year. And they're like, oh, good, just as long as you leave again. Or I would talk to them because I was living there right when the whole Syrian refugee crisis was starting, and sometimes we would have talks and I would say, so what do you think about the Syrian refugees? And I kid you not, every single one of those students said they should be helped, but they can't come to Japan. So Japan still to this day, very racist, very xenophobic. And I'm saying not all the people, but like the government, the attitude of the government and the people in general. Don't want to have immigrants, don't want to change their culture whatsoever, don't want to adapt, like first world nation and one of the lowest level English I've ever seen anywhere, which here again I actually think is really funny because liberals are going to be like, well, they shouldn't have to learn English. Of course they shouldn't have to learn English, but English has become a world language, and especially you would think in a first world nation, English would be very common, and they just basically reject it because they're so into their own culture. This again, it's not all. I have a reason for saying all this. It's not to poo on the Japanese people, because I loved living in Japan. I loved living in Japan, and if my earning to spending ratio could have been a little bit different, I probably would have stayed there longer than 1 year. But it's just about, I want people to think about perspective. So Japan during World War II and prior to that did just as many atrocities as Germany did. Just as many. I mean, just the mass murder and mass rape that they did throughout Asia, it's incredible if you research it. And to this day, they don't apologize. To this day, they hold on to their culture. To this day, they don't take on refugees. They don't really allow people to immigrate. They don't give foreigners citizenship. They don't make it easy whatsoever to get into Japan outside of tourism. But still, they have a general public positive standing in the world. And then you look at places like the US or Germany that have done bad things in their past and have done nothing but apologize for it. Nothing, and apologize and apologize and apologize. Oh my God, what Hitler did was so wrong. Oh my God, World War II, everything we did was wrong, and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. And yet, even though Germany has apologized, and even though Germany has admitted to what they did was wrong, and even though Germany has sent out millions and millions of dollars in reparations for the horribleness of what they've done, to this day, when you ask somebody somewhere in the world, what do you know about Germans? They'll tell you Hitler, they'll tell you genocide. I mean, they'll tell you some good things too, but those are definitely things that will come to their mind. And to this day, Germany, when I was a kid, we couldn't even fly a German flag outside of our house. Like, people would have been shocked. We were so told to be shameful of our own culture because of the things that we did in the past. We had to change our national anthem, etc., etc., etc. And kind of like, and this is kind of where I've also see what's going on in the US right now. You know, I mean, like, if I think about how long the US has been apologizing for slavery, I'm sorry, and saying, and trying to bring in all these different institutions and policies to make up for the slavery and all this kind of stuff. I'm not saying that these things weren't horrible, because they were, but yet here are these nations apologizing, trying to create policies to fix the problem, giving out money because they feel guilty for what they did. And in the current political times, these nations are being called racist, homophobic, sexist, terrible places to be in the world, that they're just horrible, and everybody who lives there are just horrible people, and everything they do is wrong. And then you have Japan as this beacon of like, oh, Japan is just so amazing and everything is great. And they've never even apologized. I mean, and I think this is like, the point I'm trying to make here is I think people need to think about media and how perception, and that's why I like, and I don't know, I can't really, obviously I can't prove it because that's not what happened in history, but I really wonder if Germany after World War II would have taken the stance of, hey, it was wartime, bad shit happened, fuck off, that's the way it is, if now Germany would be in a different place. If now Germany wouldn't have to deal with, like, you know, people saying, like, Germany's still having to take on the most amount of refugees, the most amount of foreigners, and it basically being absolutely unacceptable for a German to say, you know, we don't want foreigners in our country, because that's then obviously you're a neo-Nazi or whatever. And I wonder about that. I feel like maybe these nations have done a little bit too much apologizing, and I think maybe they need to stop apologizing and just say, look, it was different times, this shit happened, it is now 2020, we will move on. And I think then the attitude and what people think